This is Earl White, real estate attorney. This is a video about standard closing costs in purchase and sale transactions and the parties typically responsible for them, estimates of the amounts in New Jersey. Okay, first and largest closing cost is the Realtor commission. Typical amounts you might see between 4% on the budget side and then 6% on the higher side. But the truth is, self-respecting realtors are probably going to charge closer to that 6% because that's the value they're going to bring to the transaction, make it easier for you, and hopefully sell for a higher purchase price. It used to be the seller would almost always pay for the realtor commission. That has changed back in 2024. As you may be aware, there's a new law that states that the realtors for the seller side can't market the commission share just like they used to. So you'll see more of a trend towards the buyers paying all of the commission instead of the seller bearing the whole cost. Next cost we have in New Jersey is the Realty transfer fee. This is about 8% of the purchase price, which is necessary to pay to the county for recording the deed and mortgage. So that's typically paid for in 99% of the circumstances by the seller. And so that's the realty transfer tax. It does get reduced for senior citizen owner occupied properties. It'll be about half that. But outside of that, there's very narrow exceptions to try to remove the realty transfer tax. We have costs of the title search. The cost of the title search, basically, the buyer has to hire a title company or abstracting company that's going to run a search, several searches. One, they're going to look at for everything in the county records. Two, they're going to run judgment searches on the names of the parties. They'll do a flood search to see if the property's in a flood zone. They'll do also a municipal tax search, among other searches. It's almost always borne by the buyer. They'll also pick the company that does the title search, and the cost can be around, it depends the purpose of the title search. So if you do some very narrow ones, it could be $300. If you do a more complete, thorough one, you could see the range of $600, particularly for a real estate closing. And the title search, and then correspondingly, the buyer will get title insurance, which will be a requirement if they're getting a loan, and if any buyer is smart, they're going to get it even for a cash transaction, because the title insurance policy is the proof that you had clear title when you purchased the property. So when you go to sell, you give that to the buyer or the buyer's attorney as proof to eliminate any issues that were happened before. New Jersey does have a treaty among the title companies, so if one title company has made the determination of clear title, then usually any issue they've insured over that did not have an exception in the title insurance policy, the next title company will honor that. Costs tend to be around, it scales based on purchase price, but around 0.5% of purchase prices. Survey is a land map. Basically, typically a buyer pays for a survey. Surveyor goes out to the property, walks around the boundary lines, and will draw a map of the property. But the survey also covers other things. The surveyor also will pull up the county records. It's to search, you give them the title search and additional records. They'll also track any easements or anything they find of record in the records. And it's good because the buyer should know. And then also you can get your survey certified to the title company issuing the title insurance. And then you also have title insurance protection if the surveyor had dropped the ball or made an error in the survey. So you have that protection will carry over. So next we have loan costs. Obviously the buyer pays the loan costs all the time, but there are several costs to be aware of in this regard. One, you have the appraisal, where appraiser goes out to the property, puts a market value on the property. That tends to be around 400 to 800. It just depends on the appraiser, but a ballpark of that you will see. You have the application fees, if the buyer had any application fees for their loan. The broker commission, if there is broker commission as part of the loan, and what that might be is very variable. Just depends on what's been negotiated with the loan officer that's handling the loan. Buyer may also pay quote unquote like point. A point is a percentage, like a 1% of the loan amount. You would use points sometimes to buy down your interest rate to give yourself a better interest. And that would be necessary, maybe debt to income ratio. So you buy it down, improve that, and get the mortgage approved. Then that's pretty much the loan costs. The attorney's fees. Usually the party hiring an attorney will bear their own costs. So buyer pay buyer attorney, seller pay seller attorney. The costs are usually flat fee for residential transactions. Usually the attorneys will charge a flat fee. In my market, somewhere between $1,500 to $2,500. So, it's a pretty wide range there, but typically you're not going to get a quality attorney much cheaper than that. And some on the higher end are going to be in that higher price bracket. Commercial transaction, that could be all over the map. Some attorneys will do it hourly because it's very unpredictable. Other attorneys will do it flat fee, but it's going to be a higher flat fee based on the amount of work, how many commercial units, how many residential units, is there financing, is there not financing. All these things will go into consideration for how an attorney is going to quote a commercial transaction. If it's a mixed use building with one store and it's cash deal and it's unoccupied, it's really not complicated, but if you add financing, more units, more leases to review, it can get pretty complicated. We have a settlement fee. Settlement fee is a cost typically paid to the title company in New Jersey. It doesn't have to be paid to the title company. It could be an attorney. It could be just a settlement company separately. That cost tends to be somewhere between $325 to $750, and it's typically regulated by law, the range that they can charge, and that involves handling all the money at the closing. So they'll accept the money from the buyer and the lender, and then they will disperse the money to whoever's supposed to get it: attorneys, brokers, the seller, the surveyor, the loan broker if you had commission. That will be dispersed to the respective parties that were supposed to get it. And so that's what the settlement is. Deed and mortgage costs. So the deed and the mortgage have to get recorded with the county. That is not free. So typically it'll be around 300. It does depend on the number of pages and the amount of money involved and the number of pages, but the buyer typically bears the cost for recording the deed and the mortgage in the county record. And once it's recorded, the deed and mortgage are recorded, particularly the deed in the county record, then about 30 days after that or so, the municipality can then update their internal record. And so that's when it'll show county first, then it will show up in the city record after that. Lastly, I'm just going to group these closing costs as special circumstances because they don't always apply. So first is if a person is moving in to or buying in a condominium association or a cooperative group, like for a co-op, there typically is going to be some type of application fee. There's also typically some type of move-in fee that's non-refundable. Then sometimes there's a refundable one, but application fees, move-in fees, and there's also a capital contribution. So that is funding the reserve funds of the association. So you're buying into the association because they're going to handle the repairs of the common area. So if they're going to do that on your behalf because you own a percentage share of the common area, then you have to put into the account. So next, special circumstances is the mansion tax. Other states have it, but where I am in New Jersey, when the purchase price goes above $1 million, then the buyer is responsible for paying what is called the mansion tax. The mansion tax is 1% of the purchase price. And truth be told, it was created probably over 10 years ago before I was a real estate attorney. And at that time, $1 million really got you a mansion, and so the tax made sense. Nowadays, 2025, when this video is being recorded, $1 million still gets you a great property, of course, but it is certainly not a mansion anymore, so it is pretty punitive task. There has been legislation suggesting to increase it, but none of that's been pending, so it's a pretty hefty penalty. If the purchase price is very close to $1 million, then the buyer could cover some of the commission for the seller's agent, and that could reduce the purchase price under a range to try to get rid of the mansion tax. Obviously, nobody should be buying fake furniture for $50,000. That is not a good idea because that's a tax problem. But if you can adjust the closing cost within reason to get rid of that mansion tax, then that is a good one. If buyer is getting a loan for a hard money loan, or if the buyer is getting a commercial loan, a development loan, typically for these type of loans, the lender may secure an attorney, and the attorney and the buyer who's getting the loan will typically pay the legal fee to that attorney.